In this video, we will explore everyone who was executed in the month of March. We'll take a look at their crimes, their last words, and the final meals they requested before facing their fate. Welcome to Buried Secrets. Brad Keith Sigmon. Method of execution, firing squad. Brad Sigmon and Rebecca Barber had been in a 3-year relationship and lived together. But in early 2001, she ended things and moved back in with her parents. Sigmon, obsessed, began stalking her and insisting they get back together. The night before the crime, Sigmon talked with his friend Eugene Strobe, to whom he revealed his plan to break into the Lark home, tie up her parents, and force Barber to talk to him. Strobe refused to participate, but Sigmon went ahead alone. The next morning, he broke into the house and brutally attacked David and Gladys with a baseball bat, striking them repeatedly in the head until they died. He then stole David's gun and waited for Barber to return. When Barber arrived, Sigmon threatened her with the gun and forced her into his car. He planned to take her to North Carolina, but she managed to jump out and escape, though he fired at her as she ran. Barber survived and was hospitalized. Police launched a manhunt and issued arrest warrants for murder, kidnapping, and assault with intent to kill. Sigmon was on the run for 11 days until he was captured in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and extradited to South Carolina. Brad Sigmon's trial began on July 18, 2002, in South Carolina. From the first day, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against him, including the baseball bat used to kill David and Gladys Lark. That same day, the jury sentenced him to death. As the decision was read, his mother, Virginia Wooten, broke down in tears, while Rebecca Barber watched in silence. Sigmon looked at her one last time before being escorted out of the courtroom. It had been 23 years since Brad Sigmon was sentenced to death. During his time on death row, he filed multiple appeals, but all were denied. Finally, his execution was scheduled for March 7th. Brad Sigmon chose the firing squad over lethal injection. His attorneys argued that he made this decision due to concerns raised after recent executions involving a massive dose of pentobarbital. While witnesses stated inmates appeared to lose consciousness within minutes, reports indicated they were not pronounced dead until at least 20 minutes later. In 2022, South Carolina spent approximately $54,000 to construct a firing squad chamber inside its execution facility, located near the electric chair. Bulletproof glass was installed in the witness room, along with a chair equipped with a drainage system for blood collection and a wall to conceal the shooters. Witnesses could see the inmate's profile, but not those pulling the trigger. The firing squad became an alternative after prison officials struggled to obtain lethal injection drugs, even after a law was passed to protect the identity of drug suppliers. The new method remained an option. No South Carolina governor has granted clemency in the 49 years since the death penalty was reinstated, and Sigmon was no exception. Since 1976, only 3 people have been executed by firing squad in the United States, all in Utah. The last was in 2010. Now, Sigmon would become the first prisoner to be executed this way in South Carolina. One day before being taken to the death chamber, Sigmon requested his last meal. Initially, he had asked for 3 buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken's original recipe, intending to share them with his death row companions. But that request was denied. Instead, Sigmon was served a more modest meal. According to the South Carolina Department of Corrections, 4 pieces of fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes with gravy, biscuits, cheesecake, and sweet tea. On March 7, 2025, Brad Sigmon was executed in South Carolina by firing squad, a method not used in the United States for the past 15 years. Sigmon was strapped to a specially designed chair and had a hood placed over his head. 3 prison staff volunteers aimed their rifles at his heart. At the director's command, each of them fired live ammunition. According to witnesses, the bullet struck Sigmon's chest right above the heart. It was instantaneous. The witnesses commented that when the shots were fired, it was very loud, very chilling. Everyone in the room flinched. There was only one place where visible damage could be seen, suggesting the bullets were all grouped together. Sigmon was declared dead at 6:08 p.m. During his last words, Sigmon expressed his opposition to the death penalty, quoting 4 Bible passages that, according to him, showed nowhere in the New Testament does God give man the authority to kill another man. Through his lawyer, Sigmon made a final statement of love, asking his Christian brothers to help put an end to the death penalty. "Now we are under God's grace and mercy," said Sigmon. Gerald Bo King, Sigmon's attorney and a witness to the execution, described Brad's death as horrible and violent. In a statement, he said, "It's unimaginable that in 2025, South Carolina would execute one of its citizens in this bloody spectacle." Rebecca Armstrong, Sigmon's ex-girlfriend, mentioned in her first interview in 24 years since the murder of her parents that Sigmon's actions destroyed her family. However, she pointed out that life imprisonment should have been the option for his sentence. She expressed that she did not agree with his execution, adding that death should be something only God decides. Jesse D. Hoffman, execution method, nitrogen hypoxia. On November 26, 1996, 18-year-old Jesse D. Hoffman Jr. kidnapped 28-year-old Mary Elliott, an advertising executive in downtown New Orleans. After forcing her to withdraw money from an ATM, he drove her to a remote area in St. Tammany Parish, where he assaulted and murdered her. Hoffman was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During his trial, the jury found him guilty, and on September 11, 1998, he was sentenced to death. Despite numerous appeals, on March 18, 2025, Hoffman was executed by nitrogen hypoxia at the Louisiana State Penitentiary. Before his execution, Hoffman declined to make a final statement and chose not to have a special last meal. According to reports, Hoffman was escorted to the execution chamber at 6:12 p.m. Prison officials released the gas for about 19 minutes, and he was declared dead at 6:50 p.m. A state official acknowledged that during the execution, Hoffman showed convulsive movements before becoming still, experiencing pain in a manner similar to the first execution by nitrogen hypoxia of Kenneth Eugene Smith. Aaron Brian Gunches, execution method, lethal injection. On November 14, 2002, Aaron Brian Gunches went to his girlfriend's house in Mesa, Arizona. Upon arrival, he forced Ted Price into his car with the supposed intention of taking him to a bus station. However, realizing he didn't have money for a ticket, Gunches drove him to a desert area along the Beeline Highway. There, he shot Price 4 times, ending his life. On January 15, 2003, an Arizona public safety officer stopped Gunches at a traffic checkpoint. Gunches fired twice at the officer before fleeing, leading to a chase involving more than 50 officers. He was arrested the following day, found hiding in a barn in Wendell. In 2004, he pleaded guilty to the crime. In 2008, he was sentenced to death. Since then, Gunches repeatedly requested his own execution and criticized the state for delaying it. Although his execution was initially scheduled for April 6, 2023, new legal proceedings postponed it. Eventually, the Arizona Supreme Court set his execution for March 19, 2025. One day before his execution, Gunches was offered a last meal. He chose a double Western-style burger, spicy gyros, onion rings, and baklava. On March 19, 2025, Aaron Gunches was executed by lethal injection at Florence State Prison. He was declared dead at 10:33 a.m. Edward James, execution method, lethal injection. On the night of September 20, 1993, Edward James returned home after a party. He found the grandchildren of Elizabeth Ann, Betty, Dick sleeping in the living room. James approached 9-year-old Toni Nooner and committed a violent assault that left her unconscious. He then took her to a private area of the home where he continued the attack. Tragically, Toni later died from the injuries she sustained. Subsequently, James entered Betty Dick's bedroom and attacked her violently, using a heavy object and a knife, inflicting severe injuries. The commotion alerted her 9-year-old granddaughter, Wendy, who entered the room. James restrained Wendy before fleeing the residence. Shortly after, he fled in his car, taking some belongings with him. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted, generating numerous tips about his whereabouts. James was eventually captured on October 6, 1993, at an unemployment office in Bakersfield, California. On April 5, 1995, Edward James pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with other charges, including aggravated child abuse and kidnapping. On August 18th of the same year, he was sentenced to death. Held at Florida State Prison for nearly 30 years, his execution was scheduled for March 20th, 2025. On March 20th, Edward James was executed by lethal injection shortly after 8 p.m., approximately 9 hours after Wendell Graham's execution. He was declared dead at 8:15 p.m. There was a 2-hour delay between his scheduled and actual execution time. Florida authorities did not explain the cause of the delay. While waiting for the injection, James expressed that he did not want to make a final statement. Earlier, when sentenced to death, he had reflected on his actions, stating, "I don't want to die, but I believe it's the right punishment for what I did. From now until I'm executed, I'm just going to exist, accepting as much as possible what I've done. I truly feel in my heart that I'm doing the right thing." Wendell Graham, execution method, lethal injection. In November 2005, in Blaine County, Oklahoma, Wendell Graham and an accomplice, Johns, after drinking whiskey and discussing burglary plans, randomly chose a house to break into. Upon entering the residence, they encountered Drew Kopp, who was at the house with his 2 daughters and their friend, Amber Matthews. Although Kopp attempted to negotiate with them, Graham shot him in the head. Amber Matthews, attempting to escape with a baby, was also shot, first in the back of the head, then in the forehead. After the murders, Graham and Johns fled in a vehicle they found in the garage. They were arrested shortly after at a nearby convenience store. At trial, Graham was convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and other charges. Amber Matthews, only 23 years old, died while trying to protect the children, adding further tragedy to the crime. Johns was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Graham was sentenced to death. His execution was scheduled for March 20th, 2025. He had a clemency hearing scheduled 1 day before his execution. For his last meal, Graham chose a supreme pizza with Canadian bacon, half a liter of vanilla ice cream, and half a liter of Coca-Cola. On March 20th, 2025, Wendell Graham was executed by lethal injection. His last words were, "I apologize to everyone for the harm I have caused. I deeply regret having instilled that hatred in your hearts. I sincerely regret what I did, not only because it brought me here, but because I can't even imagine the trauma, pain, and suffering I caused to the victims and their families. It saddens me greatly to have sown so much hatred in your hearts, because I am not the person the state of Oklahoma has portrayed me to be." That concludes the list of those executed in March 2025. Their crimes, final meals, and last words tell complex, tragic stories that still ripple across families and communities. What do you think about the death penalty? Do you believe justice was truly served in these cases? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Buried Secrets, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more real-life crime stories and execution breakdowns coming soon. It'll only take 3 seconds.